Hey guys, tonight we drift gently across the still waters of Lake Texcoco. Well, what's left of it anyway. Picture this, a city that floats, or at least that seems to. The surface gleams like liquid glass, and rising out of it are temples, causeways, and gardens so lush they look like they've been painted by someone who didn't understand what too much green meant. You're gliding in a small canoe through these watery streets, volcanoes glowing orange on the horizon, and the air smells faintly of wet earth and corn. It's beautiful. It's hypnotic. And if you lived here 500 years ago, you probably wouldn't survive the mosquitoes, the sun, or the constant threat of angry priests, but still, quite a view. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight, and what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in Tenochtitlán, the heart of the Aztec Empire, around the year 1518. The city doesn't just sit on the lake, it is the lake, woven into it like embroidery. Canals crisscross the metropolis, lined with houses of white plaster and vivid murals, all built on small islands linked by causeways and bridges. It's said that when the morning sun hits the water, the entire city shimmers like a mirage. Spanish conquistadors later called it a second Venice, though this Venice has pyramids instead of churches and obsidian blades instead of gondolas. You drift past a man tossing water onto a patch of green, an island that looks as if it's floating. He's tending what the Aztecs called Chinampas, the legendary floating gardens. You'll hear about those soon enough. For now, you just breathe in the scent of fresh maize and lake mud, listening to the gentle slap of the paddle. Historians still argue whether Tenochtitlan really floated, or if that's just a poetic misunderstanding. In truth, the city sat on a series of artificial islands anchored into the lakebed by thousands of wooden stakes. The Aztecs didn't build on water so much as with it, bending nature to their will with a mix of geometry, patience, and good old-fashioned mud. And what mud it was! Beneath the canoe, the lake hides a rich layer of organic muck, perfect for farming, though a terrible choice for laundry. The Aztecs figured out that if you pile enough of that goo onto woven mats of reeds, tether it with willows, and let it settle, it'll become solid enough to stand on. That's how entire neighborhoods emerged, from water, one basket of mud at a time. You can almost hear the squelch as your sandals sink into it. The air is busy with sound. Vendors calling across the canals, children splashing, and the occasional frog that croaks like it swallowed a trumpet. You watch a procession glide by, priests in feathered cloaks carrying flowers to offer at a shrine. The smell of incense mixes with the lake's earthy sweetness. The Aztecs believed their city sat at the center of the universe, a literal and spiritual axis that kept the cosmos balanced. They called it the navel of the world. Every reed, every ripple was part of a grand design linking heaven, earth, and the underworld. It's funny, really, you're floating in a mud-based ecosystem that somehow doubled as a cosmic diagram. A quirky fact, the Aztecs used volcanic rock to build levees that controlled the lake's salinity, dividing fresh and brackish water zones. That's right, this civilization didn't just have plumbing, it had lake zoning laws. And while you might think that's bureaucratic overkill, it's also why their crops thrived where others failed. You drift closer to one of the causeways, broad enough for armies, yet flanked by canals wide enough for canoes to pass in parallel. Imagine morning traffic here. Boats jammed nose to nose, merchants arguing over tomatoes, and the occasional priest cutting in line because, well, divine privileges. The whole city moves to the rhythm of paddles, water lapping against wood, and the rustle of maize leaves in the breeze. You pause near a small altar where a farmer offers flowers to Tlaloc, god of rain. He mutters a prayer under his breath, hoping the water spirits keep the Chinampas fertile. You can almost feel his superstition. It's part gratitude and part quiet terror. After all, if the rains didn't come, the floating world might just sink. You notice something odd. The water isn't still. It hums, rippling slightly, as if alive. Maybe it's just the wind, or maybe it's the unseen movement of life below. Fish, snails, even salamanders with frilly gills drifting like underwater lace. This whole place breathes. Historians still debate how much of Tenochtitlan's layout was planned versus how much just evolved. Some think it was meticulously designed by priests with a cosmic blueprint in mind. Others believe it simply grew wherever people found space to shove another stake into the mud. Either way, the result was the same. A metropolis that seemed to defy logic, built by people who refused to let water be an obstacle. As dusk settles, you notice the way the lake mirrors the sky, turning the city into a constellation, lights above and below. You can't tell where heaven ends and water begins. Somewhere in the distance, someone starts playing a flute, its soft notes drifting across the canals. The sound feels ancient, fragile, like it might vanish if you breathe too hard. You paddle onward, letting the night fold around you. The city of water hums softly, alive and ancient, its secrets held in the quiet ripples. You don't know it yet, but those islands of mud and reeds, the Chinampas, are about to become the most extraordinary agricultural system the world has ever seen. You wake with the sound of water lapping against your canoe. Dawn seeps across the horizon, painting the sky in layers of pink and gray. The mist floats low, soft and ghostly, hiding the edges of the city. Somewhere nearby, a paddle dips into the lake with a slow, practiced rhythm. The man steering the boat hums quietly, a tune passed down from 1,000 mornings just like this one. You follow him, watching as he glides toward a small green island that looks like it's breathing. That island, barely the size of a tennis court, is a Chinampa. And no, it's not technically floating. It's better, anchored, self-watering, and absurdly fertile. The Aztecs built them by hand, stacking reeds, lake sediment, and rotting vegetation into thick, buoyant layers. Imagine building a lasagna, but instead of cheese and pasta, you use mud and twigs, and at the end, you can grow dinner on top of it. Historians still argue whether the idea came from the earlier civilizations around Lake Xochimilco, or if the Aztecs perfected it on their own. Either way, it became one of the most efficient farming systems ever created. So good that 5 centuries later, scientists are still trying to copy it. You step off the canoe and feel the ground bounce slightly under your feet, springy like a wet sponge. The farmer beside you doesn't even notice. He's busy driving a stake into the edge of the island, securing it with woven reeds. It's all about balance here. Too much weight, and the whole thing could sag into the water. Too little, and it might drift away in the night like an agricultural ghost. He scoops mud from the canal with a hollowed-out gourd, spreading it over the surface. The air smells rich and earthy, like compost and wet roots. You realize you're standing on centuries of layered sediment, built up and renewed season after season. The Chinampa isn't just a farm, it's a living machine. The process is deceptively simple. First, you weave a fence of reeds in a rectangular shape, usually about 30 feet wide and 100 feet long. Then, you fill it with alternating layers of mud, decaying vegetation, and lakeweeds until the top rises a few feet above the waterline. Finally, you plant willow trees at the corners to anchor it all down with their roots. In time, the whole structure fuses together, part raft, part garden, part miracle. A quirky fact: the Aztecs used to seed their crops in floating trays of mud before transplanting them to the Chinampas,
Think of it as a 15th century version of hydroponics, minus the plastic tubing and LED lights. Some scholars even claim these early seed beds were so precise that each farmer could predict exactly how many ears of corn he'd harvest months in advance. You crouch beside a row of maize, feeling the warmth of the early sun on your back. Tiny droplets cling to the leaves, glittering like jewels. The farmer's hands move quickly, pruning, rearranging, whispering small prayers to coax the plants upward. There's a rhythm in it, a conversation between human and soil. You realize that every movement here has been repeated for generations, like choreography passed down in silence. Why all the effort, you might ask, if you weren't half asleep and mesmerized? Because these gardens were the lungs of the city. They fed tens of thousands of people, producing up to 7 crops a year: corn, beans, squash, chilies, amaranth, and flowers, each chinampa a patchwork of color and scent. You imagine it from above, an emerald mosaic floating on silver water, stitched together by narrow canals like blue veins. Historians still debate how many Chinampas once covered the valley. Some claim over 9,000 hectares, an area large enough to feed the entire empire. Others say the numbers were exaggerated by Spanish chroniclers, dazzled by what they saw. But even the most conservative estimates make your modern backyard garden look like a sad potted plant by comparison. The farmer pauses to stretch. He points toward a nearby island where smoke curls lazily from a clay stove. Breakfast is being made, corn cakes sizzling on a griddle, beans bubbling in a pot. You can almost taste it, earthy, simple, perfect. You look around and realize something extraordinary. Every piece of this landscape is handmade. The lake, the fields, even the boundaries of land and water, they're all the result of human intention. It's as if the Aztecs refused to accept natural geography and decided to rewrite it themselves. Of course, not everything went perfectly. Sometimes the Chinampas rotted from below, or storms tore them apart. Floods could swallow entire fields overnight. The Aztecs responded the only way they knew. They built more. Persistence for them was a form of faith. A stray bird lands near you, a heron, tall and elegant, eyeing the water for breakfast. You notice its reflection ripple against your own. For a moment, everything feels still. The farmer hums again. The reeds sway gently, and the lake glints gold under the rising sun. Then, a quiet joke sneaks into your mind. The Aztecs basically built a floating suburb that doubled as a salad bar. HOA rules probably included no jaguar sacrifices before 6 a.m. The farmer laughs softly when you mention it. Well, at least in your imagination, he does. Humor isn't far from history here. The people who lived and worked on these waters weren't mythical beings. They were humans with tired backs, muddy feet, and probably a few sarcastic thoughts about how often the high priests asked for volunteer labor. You watch as the man collects a handful of fresh weeds from the canal, adding them to his compost pile. It's a small act, but it embodies the genius of the entire system. Waste becomes fertility, decay becomes food. Nothing is lost. As the sun climbs higher, the mist burns away, revealing more of the network, thousands of islands stretching into the distance, separated by ribbons of blue. From here, Tenochtitlán looks less like a city and more like an organism, alive and pulsing. You realize that you're standing in the middle of one of humanity's greatest engineering achievements, one built not with stone or steel, but with mud, roots, and patience. And somewhere beneath your feet, the lake stirs quietly, whispering secrets that only the reeds can hear.
The day brightens, and so does the bustle. You've been drifting for a while now, the sun glinting off the ripples like shattered glass. Ahead, you see a man paddling toward one of the islands, his Chinampa. He's thin, wearing a loose cotton tunic that's seen too many seasons, and a straw hat wide enough to host a small fiesta. His canoe is piled high with tools, a digging stick, a bundle of seedlings, and a clay cup that clinks softly as he rows. You follow him, gliding through narrow channels that smell of warm mud and growing things. The air hums with insect life, and somewhere, a frog croaks like it's auditioning for a solo. This is the start of his day, the life of a Chinampero, an Aztec farmer whose world begins and ends in water. When he reaches the edge of his island, he steps out barefoot, the mud squeezing between his toes. He doesn't seem to notice. He's done this since childhood. You imagine his father teaching him where to plant the maize, how to read the weather from the shape of the clouds, and when to scoop nutrient-rich silt from the canal. Farming here isn't a job. It's a rhythm, a way of keeping balance between man, lake, and sky. He begins his morning routine, which, if we're being honest, looks a lot like yoga with extra mud. He stretches, digs, waters, and mutters to himself about the ducks that stole last night's seedlings. A quirk of these Chinampas: they're so fertile that weeds grow faster than you can pull them, and if you fall behind, your floating garden starts to look like a swamp with ambitions. Historians still argue whether Chinamperos worked individually or in family collectives. Some evidence suggests entire clans managed networks of plots, passing them down through generations like heirlooms. Others think state-appointed overseers rotated farmers between fields to maintain fairness and production quotas. Either way, you can tell this man takes pride in his patch. Every plant seems placed with intention. He starts with corn, the sacred backbone of Aztec life. Each stalk is spaced just right, its roots drinking from the damp soil. Beside it, beans twine upward, hugging the corn for support, while squash sprawls low to shade the ground. The three sisters of Mesoamerica, an agricultural trio so perfect that modern permaculture still borrows their tricks. You could almost hear the plants whisper to each other, "You handle nitrogen, I'll block the sun." You squat beside him, running your fingers through the soil. It's cool and rich, flecked with bits of reed and shell. This, you realize, is the magic of the Chinampa. It's never dry, never barren. The canals feed it constantly, pulling nutrients from the decomposing vegetation below. You could plant corn here year after year without exhausting the earth. Imagine that. 500 years before synthetic fertilizer, they'd already solved soil depletion. The farmer moves methodically, singing under his breath. The tune has no words, just notes rising and falling like the waves. It's an old habit. Aztec farmers believed music soothed the crops. You can't prove it doesn't. Every so often, he straightens to watch the water. His eyes are sharp, scanning for intruders, otters, ducks, maybe even a stray axolotl poking its head up like a curious puppet. These creatures are part of the system too, each one a cog in the living machine. Even their waste feeds the fields. It's not exactly dinner conversation, but it works. A quirky fact: the Aztecs sometimes built small floating bee islands near their Chinampas to encourage pollination. They didn't have honeybees, those were a European import, but they used stingless native bees whose honey was thin and tangy like liquid sunshine. Imagine that, beekeeping on a raft. You notice how organized everything feels. The edges of the Chinampa are trimmed with willows and reeds, not just for looks, but for structure. The tree's roots hold the soil in place, while their leaves create shade that cools the canals. Even the water level is carefully maintained by tiny wooden sluices. You're looking at precision farming centuries before spreadsheets or irrigation sensors. The farmer stops to rest, squatting at the water's edge. He dips a cup into the canal, drinks deeply, and wipes his mouth with the back of his hand. You hesitate because, well, modern you would not drink lake water unless he wanted to meet some impressive bacteria, but he's built up a tolerance that would shame a mountain goat. He smiles faintly and gestures for you to sit. Around you, the morning light sharpens into gold. Across the canal, you can see other Chinamperos at work, women gathering flowers, children herding ducks along the shore. an old man stacking reeds into neat bundles. It's a quiet choreography of survival. Historians still debate how much of this daily life was ritual versus practicality. Did the Aztecs farm because they had to, or because they saw it as a sacred obligation? Their mythology suggests both. According to legend, the gods bled themselves to bring fertility to the earth. In return, humans owed them labor, the slow, humble act of keeping the world alive, one maize stalk at a time. The farmer begins humming again, louder this time. You join him, softly, letting your voice blend with his. For a moment, the sound feels timeless, like the lake remembers every note ever sung on its surface. You realize that while empires rose and fell, these farmers stayed, tending mud and water as the centuries passed above them. And because you're not above making mental jokes while surrounded by divine serenity, you imagine what a motivational poster for these people would look like. Hang in there, your Chinampa isn't going to build itself. You stand as the farmer gathers his tools, tucking seedlings into the folds of his tunic. He nods at you before stepping into his canoe. The water parts soundlessly as he rows to the next island. You follow him, gliding alongside him, your reflection rippling between the clouds above and the reeds below. The air smells of sunlight on water. In the distance, bells ring faintly from the temples of Tenochtitlán, summoning priests to morning rituals. The sound mingles with the rhythm of paddles and birdsong. It's peaceful, but not idle. The whole system is alive, humming, producing, feeding. And as you drift onward, you start to feel it. The heartbeat of a civilization that understood balance better than most of us ever will. Everything here is built on cooperation. Man with nature, soil with water, corn with beans. Even the mud has a purpose. You drift onward, the sound of paddles fading into the breeze. The sun is higher now, and the lake shimmers like a field of mirrors. Somewhere ahead, more Chinampas wait. Each one a little piece of magic stitched into the skin of the world.
The sun hangs directly overhead now, bright and sharp, flattening the colors of the lake into one long shimmer of light. You squint, shading your eyes with your hand. The air smells of heat and maize and faint traces of smoke drifting from distant cook fires. Somewhere nearby, the slow rhythm of a drum begins, soft, steady, like a heartbeat hidden in the landscape. You let your canoe drift until you come alongside another Chinampa, this one bursting with green. Rows of maize stretch tall and proud, their leaves rattling softly in the breeze. Between them grow beans, climbing like polite thieves up the stalks, and wide-leaved squash sprawls at their feet, shading the soil. The plants seem to know what they're doing, partners, not competitors. You can almost sense their quiet cooperation. The farmer here is older, his skin weathered into lines that look like maps of the canals themselves. He straightens when he sees you and waves you over, holding up an ear of corn as though it were a royal invitation. You accept. After all, who says no to an Aztec corn tasting? He pulls back the husk, revealing golden kernels glinting like small coins. When he hands it to you, it's warm from the sun. You bite in. It's sweeter than you expect, with a faint smokiness that lingers. You can taste the lake in it somehow, the minerals, the silt, the patient years of tending. Corn wasn't just food to the Aztecs, it was cosmic currency. They believed humans were literally made from maize dough, shaped by the gods and brought to life with divine breath. Every bite, therefore, was a small act of communion. You can't help but feel slightly guilty for chewing so casually on your own spiritual cousin. Historians still argue whether this maize mythology arose from religion or survival instinct. Was it born of reverence, or simply gratitude for a crop that refused to fail? Either way, it became the backbone of everything: economy, ceremony, identity. The Aztecs didn't just grow corn, they built their entire civilization around it. The farmer laughs softly at your reverent expression and gestures toward the rest of his Chinampa. You follow him down a narrow path of compacted soil where chili plants burn red against the green. The scent hits you immediately, sweet, sharp, and dangerous. He plucks one, splits it open with his thumb, and motions for you to smell it. You do, and instantly regret it. It's like sniffing bottled lightning. Your eyes water, your throat tightens, and you can't decide whether you're awake or transcending. He chuckles knowingly and mutters something that probably translates to, "You city people are all the same." To the Aztecs, chilis weren't just seasoning. They were sacred fire. They burned away evil, cleansed the spirit, and, conveniently, made even plain maize taste heavenly. Archaeologists have found evidence of chili use in nearly every level of Aztec society, from street markets to royal feasts. Even infants, apparently, were introduced to spicy foods early on, though no one's entirely sure whether that was cultural tradition or early character building. Beyond the chilies, rows of amaranth sway in the breeze. Its tiny, glimmering seeds were another staple, used in rituals as offerings to the gods. Sometimes they shaped the dough into figures of deities and then, after the proper prayers, ate them, a literal communion. You take another bite of your corn, suddenly aware that every meal here carried a whisper of the divine. The farmer points to the sky, where a hawk circles lazily and then gestures toward his fields again. He's explaining the cosmic balance, the idea that tending the Chinampa mirrors the way the gods tended the universe. Every weed pulled, every seed planted, keeps the world in order. Neglect it, and the fabric of existence starts to fray. You try to imagine farming as a sacred duty instead of a chore. For the Aztecs, there was no separation between religion and daily life. Everything had weight, meaning, and consequence. Even washing in the canal carried ritual significance, although, admittedly, that might just be because of the smell. A quirky fact, the Aztecs brewed a drink called atole, a thick porridge of corn and water, sometimes flavored with honey or chili. It was their morning coffee, comfort food, and energy shake all in one. Imagine starting your day with a hot cup of corn sludge and optimism. You suspect Starbucks wouldn't last long here. You and the farmer sit at the edge of the canal for a while, legs dangling in the water. The air hums softly, cicadas, paddles, distant chatter. The lake stretches endlessly before you, reflecting the distant outline of the temples at Tenochtitlan's heart. He gestures toward them and says something you half understand. We feed them, they feed the gods. It's not pride in his voice, it's duty. Historians still debate how much of that duty was voluntary. Were the farmers genuinely devoted, or simply fulfilling the demands of a system that saw divine debt as law? No one knows for sure. The truth probably lies between devotion and fear, the twin forces that have always powered civilizations. The old man hands you a flower from the edge of the field, a bright orange marigold. He tells you it's for Xochipilli, the god of flowers, games, and art. Beauty feeds the gods too, he says with a smile. You tuck it behind your ear, feeling faintly ridiculous and oddly honored. As you prepare to leave, he holds up a single maize kernel and presses it into your palm. It's small, hard, and gleaming like amber. He says, "The world in one seed." You nod, pocket it carefully, and climb back into your canoe. You drift away, the Chinampa shrinking behind you, its colors blending into the lake. You think about how the Aztecs saw life as a loop, a cycle of giving and taking, planting and consuming, dying and rebirth. They didn't separate the sacred from the ordinary. To them, The gods weren't in the sky. They were in the soil, the seed, and the sweat of the farmer's brow. A breeze stirs, carrying the scent of chilies and marigolds. You close your eyes, letting the warmth soak through you. For a moment, you feel part of that balance, floating between heaven and earth, maize and mud, faith and hunger. Then your stomach growls, loud enough to startle a duck nearby. You laugh softly. Sacred or not, you could really go for some corn cakes right about now.
The afternoon sun begins its slow slide downward, and the heat softens. The world feels hushed, golden, sleepy. You've paddled further from the heart of the city now, deeper into the quiet networks of Chinampas, where the lake narrows and reeds grow thick enough to brush your shoulders as you pass. The air changes here. It's cooler, tinged with the faint sweetness of algae and the musty perfume of rotting vegetation. You wrinkle your nose, but it's oddly pleasant, like the smell of rain-soaked earth after a long drought. Beneath the surface, the real citizens of this world move unseen. You pause your paddling, letting the canoe drift silently, and peer down through the water. It's greenish and murky, but alive with motion. Tiny fish flashing like sparks, water bugs skating effortlessly across the top, and somewhere below, shadows that might be something more mysterious. You lean closer and catch sight of one, a pale, almost translucent creature gliding lazily among the reeds. Its frilled gills flutter like lace curtains, and its face, if you can call it that, looks perpetually amused. The axolotl, a legend with gills. You found one of the lake's strangest residents. The Aztecs knew this creature well and named it after one of their gods, Xolotl, the trickster twin of Quetzalcoatl, god of fire and lightning. According to myth, Xolotl refused to be sacrificed to set the sun in motion. Instead, he transformed himself into various creatures to escape the god's wrath, finally taking refuge in the lake as an axolotl, forever trapped between fish and salamander, life and death. You can't help but admire his creativity, a god on the run, hiding out as a smiling amphibian. A quirky fact: modern scientists still marvel at the axolotl's ability to regenerate entire limbs, spinal cords, even parts of its brain. It's basically nature's Control-Z button. You wonder if Xolotl's myth was humanity's early attempt at explaining that uncanny resilience, divinity disguised as biology. The farmer you met earlier isn't far away, wading knee-deep in water, scooping weeds with a flat basket. He greets you with a nod, water dripping from his elbows. You watch as he piles the weeds at the base of his chinampa. They'll rot down and feed the soil, creating more of that black, breathing earth you felt earlier. But as he works, small creatures dart in and out between his legs. Fish, frogs, insects, all thriving in the nutrient-rich shallows. You realize that this whole lake, this entire system, is one vast conversation between species. Every breath, every ripple matters. The Aztecs didn't just farm on water, they farmed with it. Historians still argue whether they fully understood the science behind this balance or simply learned through generations of observation. Did they know that nitrogen from fish waste fed their crops? Did they notice how aquatic plants filtered toxins and kept the lake clean? Probably not in our modern biochemical terms, but they knew enough to live within the rhythm, not against it. You lean back in the canoe and let your hand drift into the water. A fish brushes your fingers, a flash of silver gone in a heartbeat. The surface shimmers again, disturbed only by concentric rings of motion. The lake feels alive, not just metaphorically, but literally pulsing with hidden life. Somewhere nearby, a turtle's head pops up, regards you with the slow suspicion of an elder philosopher, and sinks again. The reeds rustle suddenly, and a low splash startles you. Something larger moves under the surface. You tense, your imagination kindly suggests prehistoric lake monster. But a moment later, a large bird bursts out of the shallows instead, flapping its wings and shaking droplets into the sunlight. An egret, pure white and impossibly graceful. It soars away toward the horizon, leaving ripples that sparkle like melted gold. You laugh softly, alone on the water. "Okay," you whisper, "not a monster." Still, it's easy to see how myths were born here. The lake hides more than it reveals, and every shadow could be divine. The Aztecs filled their waters with spirits, rain gods, fertility goddesses, tricksters, ancestors. Even the mud had a soul. You can almost hear them whispering beneath the reeds, the ancient voices that once guided the farmers through droughts and floods. A small canoe passes nearby, 2 children aboard. They're scattering crumbs of maize into the water, feeding the fish. You wave, they giggle, and wave back before disappearing behind a curtain of reeds. It's a simple gesture, but it's part of the cycle too, feeding the lake so that the lake can feed them. You imagine them learning, as all children here do, that the world is not a ladder, but a circle. Historians still debate whether the Aztecs saw themselves as stewards of nature or its rulers. Their empire was undeniably vast and demanding. Their rituals were often bloody and absolute. But out here in these quiet canals, you feel something gentler, respect, perhaps, or gratitude wrapped in superstition. They didn't dominate the lake, they collaborated with it. The farmer wades back to his canoe, his basket now full of slimy, dripping weeds. As he paddles away, you notice something fascinating. The Chinampas aren't fixed. The roots of the willows tether them, yes, but the edges are soft, porous, constantly shifting. It's like the boundary between land and water refuses to make up its mind. And maybe that's the point. Stability through flexibility. Life that endures because it bends. You smile. The modern world could probably use a little more of that philosophy. A dragonfly lands briefly on the edge of your paddle, wings vibrating like translucent glass. It stares at you with bulbous indifference before darting away. You watch it vanish over the reeds, trailing light behind it. Everything here seems designed to blur the line between the seen and the unseen. Creatures born from myths, and myths born from creatures. You paddle lazily, following the faint current through a narrow channel. The sounds of the city fade entirely now, replaced by frogs and the soft swish of water against the hull. It's hypnotic. You catch yourself breathing slower, deeper, like the lake has pulled you into its rhythm. And as you drift, a stray thought bubbles up. Maybe this is what paradise looked like to the Aztecs, not some distant afterlife, but this, green, alive, humming with balance, a world where even decay is sacred. You trail your fingers once more into the water, feeling its cool weight. Beneath you, unseen, axolotls glide among the roots, fish stir the sediment, and unseen bacteria turn death into nourishment. Everything in motion, everything in cycle. You think about that trickster god again, hiding here forever as a smiling salamander. Maybe he didn't lose after all. Maybe he found the best hiding place imaginable, right in the heart of life itself.
The sun dips lower now, slipping toward the jagged horizon of distant temples. The lake changes personality in the late afternoon light. Gold turns to copper. The air cools just enough for goosebumps, and everything seems to slow in sympathy. You glide through the water at a lazy pace, or cutting quiet ripples.
A dragonfly passes so close you hear the whisper of its wings, and for a moment you could swear time itself pauses to admire the view. Up ahead, the scent of smoke curls through the air, wood smoke, roasted maize, and something faintly spicy. Your stomach perks up immediately, that loyal companion always ready to lead you toward adventure. You follow your nose and soon find yourself near a cluster of boats pulled together in a loose circle. Laughter drifts across the water, along with the deep thump of a hand drum. Evening on the Chinampas, it seems, is less about work and more about reward. You tie your canoe to a stake and climb onto one of the floating gardens where a small group of families are gathered. There's music, chatter, and best of all, food. Someone hands you a steaming tamal wrapped in maize leaves, and before you can protest, you've already accepted it. The warmth seeps into your palms, and the aroma, corn, chili, and some kind of herb you can't name, hits you like a soft punch of happiness. You take a bite. It's dense, comforting, and ridiculously good. Whatever else the Aztecs got wrong, like, say, their whole heart removal as a service to the gods thing, they nailed comfort food. A young man beside you grins and says something about it being made with huitlacoche, corn fungus, often called the truffle of Mexico. You blink, mid-bite. Fungus. He laughs at your hesitation and says, "The gods love it, so do we." You shrug and take another bite. Honestly, he's right. If fungus always tasted this rich, mushrooms everywhere would demand royalties. As you eat, someone plucks a tune on a small wooden flute, high and lilting. The sound mingles with the crackle of the fire and the soft lapping of the canal. You realize you're sitting in the same kind of community that's existed here for centuries. Neighbors sharing food, laughter, and the kind of music that doesn't need electricity, only rhythm and air. Historians still argue whether these evening gatherings were primarily social or spiritual. Some evidence suggests they doubled as small rituals, offerings of thanks to the lake spirits and agricultural deities for another day of abundance. Others think they were just a good excuse to gossip and show off new chili recipes. Either way, it's clear the Aztecs didn't see a firm line between worship and joy. Both fed the soul. An older woman sits nearby, braiding flowers into a garland. She hums softly, eyes half closed, lost in the melody. You watch her weave marigolds and dahlias together with practiced ease, her fingers moving like water. When she finishes, she lifts the garland and places it gently on a clay figure at the edge of the garden, a small, smiling sculpture of Tlaloc, the rain god. You recognize him from the murals you've seen in museums, round eyes, fanged mouth, and a perpetual expression of, "Did someone forget to water the plants again?" She notices your gaze and explains that it's good luck to honor Tlaloc before nightfall, especially during the growing season. Rain isn't guaranteed, even for the Aztecs, who built an entire religion around keeping the gods hydrated and happy. You glance at the sky, where clouds gather faintly in the distance. Maybe he's listening. A quirky fact: some Chinampa farmers used to whisper directly into the soil as they planted seeds, telling the maize to grow tall and strong. They believed the plants listened, and if you treated them kindly, they would reward you with healthy harvests. Modern studies show plants do respond to sound vibrations, which makes you wonder if those ancient farmers were onto something long before science caught up. The young man with the tamales passes around a jug of pulque, a cloudy, slightly foamy drink made from fermented agave sap. He grins and offers you some. You hesitate. It smells faintly like overripe fruit and mild regret, but he insists. You take a sip. It's tangy, sour, oddly fizzy, and surprisingly refreshing,
like kombucha's mischievous ancestor. Pulque was sacred to the Aztecs, reserved for priests, nobles, and ritual use. Commoners could drink it too, but only during festivals, or apparently after a long day of farming. Historians still debate whether its popularity was for its divine connection or simply because it made tedious canal maintenance feel like karaoke night. The man beside you laughs at your reaction and says, "You drink too fast, the lake will spin." You smile back and take smaller sips, though you can't shake the feeling he might not be joking. As twilight deepens, fireflies begin to appear, flickering above the water like drifting embers. Their reflections shimmer across the canal, doubling the magic. Children chase them with cupped hands, giggling when the lights vanish between their fingers. A few dogs bark somewhere in the distance, scrappy, wiry creatures that look half wild and half bored. You settle back, full, warm, and lulled by the rhythm of the drum. The sound is steady, almost hypnotic, a soft, repetitive heartbeat of the Chinampas themselves. The night creatures start their chorus. Frogs, crickets, the occasional splash of something unseen. You feel the edges of the world blur again. The city seems far away now, irrelevant, like a dream someone else had. The old woman with the flowers turns to you and says, "The lake remembers every offering, every song, every seed. Even after we are gone, it remembers." You glance at the water, dark now except for streaks of starlight. The surface is calm, unbothered. You wonder what it has seen. Centuries of paddles, prayers, laughter, conquest. If water could dream, surely this lake dreams in color. Historians still argue whether the Aztec reverence for the lake was born of necessity or worship. Did they bow to it out of fear or love? Perhaps it doesn't matter. Standing here surrounded by the hum of insects and the crackle of fire, you understand that the line between fear and reverence is often just another reflection on the water. You finish the last of your pulque and hand the jug back with a thank you. The old woman nods, eyes glinting in the firelight, and tells you that in her grandmother's stories, the lake was alive. It listened, it remembered, it even answered, if you were quiet enough to hear. You decide to test the theory. You close your eyes, breathe in the scent of smoke and wet earth, and listen. For a long, still moment, there's nothing. Then, faintly, the ripple of water against wood, like a sigh. You smile. Maybe that's an answer.
Night has taken full hold now, and the lake is no longer a mirror of sunlight, but a black silk sheet scattered with the reflections of stars. You push away from the gathering, your canoe sliding quietly into the dark canal. The laughter and drums fade behind you, replaced by the steady creak of your paddle and the whisper of reeds brushing your shoulders. The world narrows to a tunnel of shadow and sound, calm but alive in a secret kind of way. The Chinampas stretch endlessly, their silhouettes blending into one another, marked only by the occasional lantern flicker or the ghostly shape of a heron standing motionless in the shallows. The air has changed, cooler now, dense with mist rising off the water. You can taste it on your tongue, faintly metallic, faintly sweet. The kind of air that feels ancient, like it's been breathed in and out by generations. You don't feel lonely out here. You feel watched, but not in a sinister way. More like the lake itself is keeping tabs on you, making sure you don't drift too far into the wrong canal. After all, according to old tales, the night is when the lake spirits come out to stretch their watery legs. The paddle dips silently, and you remember one story in particular, the legend of the La Llorona-like woman of the Chinampas, sometimes called La Señora del Agua. The Aztecs spoke of her long before Spanish stories ever arrived.
She was said to wander the canals at night, searching for something or someone she had lost, her wail carried softly by the wind. Fishermen swore they'd heard her weeping between the reeds. Others claimed she was the voice of the lake itself, crying for all that would one day be taken from it. Historians still argue whether the legend began as a warning to keep children off the canals after dark, or as a metaphor for the fragile balance of the ecosystem. Either way, it worked. You feel the strong, immediate desire to stay firmly seated in your canoe. You keep paddling, slow and steady, eyes adjusting to the silvery dark. Every sound feels magnified, the plop of a fish, the croak of a bullfrog, the faint hiss of reeds swaying in the wind. Somewhere behind you, a splash echoes, too large for a fish. You freeze, heart doing its best impression of a hummingbird. Then you spot the culprit, a large bird landing awkwardly in the water, clearly annoyed with itself. You exhale, grinning. "Nice one," you mutter under your breath. There's something mesmerizing about traveling the Chinampas by night. The day belonged to the farmers and merchants, but the night belongs to whispers, stories, and memory. The stars overhead are sharper here, framed by the dark edges of the trees. One of them streaks suddenly across the sky, leaving a pale trail. You make a quiet wish, something small and unimportant, like always remembering this sound, this peace. You pass a cluster of Chinampas where people are still awake. Small fires burn in clay bowls, their light casting flickering patterns on the water. You catch snippets of conversation in Nahuatl, laughter carried softly across the canal. A man's voice rises in song, slow, rhythmic, full of that melancholy beauty that comes from centuries of survival. You drift closer, unnoticed, and realize the song is an offering to Tlaloc again, asking for gentle rain and protection for the crops. It's not a grand temple chant, just a fisherman murmuring to the dark. His paddle dips in rhythm with the song, and every movement feels like prayer. A quirky fact, the Aztecs believed that the rain god's messengers lived in mountain caves, controlling the weather with jars of water. When they broke the jars, rain would fall. Thunder then was just the sound of divine pottery smashing in the clouds. You picture a celestial kitchen where every storm is a cosmic accident, and smile at the thought. The fisherman finishes his song, and silence settles again, thick and peaceful. You float on, feeling the rhythm of the night sink into you. Even the insects have slowed their chorus now. Somewhere in the dark, a frog croaks once and then goes quiet, as if realizing it's past bedtime. You start to think about the farmers who once slept here in reed huts, the traders who navigated these same canals under moonlight, the priests who believed the lake was a living bridge between worlds. Historians still argue whether the Chinampas were seen purely as human-made marvels or semi-divine creations, a gift from the gods themselves. It's hard to tell where engineering ends and mythology begins when both are built on mud and faith. You set your paddle across your knees and let the canoe drift freely for a while. The current is barely noticeable, just enough to keep you moving. The stars shimmer, their reflections broken only when a fish breaks the surface and disappears again with barely a ripple. The night smells of wet earth and wood smoke, and somewhere, faintly, the sound of a flute returns, distant, echoing like the memory of music. You find yourself wondering how it must have felt to live your whole life here, on the water, beneath the same stars, to know every reed by touch, every ripple by sound, to measure time not in hours, but in the growth of maize, the rise and fall of the lake. You imagine lying back in your canoe, staring at the sky, thinking the same thought centuries ago, different language, same heartbeat. Your eyes begin to grow heavy. The rhythm of the paddle and the water has worked its quiet hypnosis. You blink slowly, letting the stars blur a little. Maybe I'll rest for just a moment, you tell yourself, just one. The canoe rocks gently, the lake murmurs softly beneath you, and in the distance a faint cry echoes, a woman's voice, low and carried by the wind. You sit up suddenly, pulse quickening. It fades just as fast as it came, leaving only silence. Probably a night bird. Probably. You smile nervously to yourself. Sure, you whisper. Definitely a bird. Still, you paddle a little faster after that, just in case. As you round a bend, the faint glow of Tenochtitlán returns on the horizon, gold and fire reflecting in the still water. The city is preparing for something. You can hear drums again, deeper this time, more deliberate. Tomorrow you'll find out what. For now, the lake is still, watching you leave. The stars ripple gently, like eyes blinking. You whisper a thank you to the water, a small, instinctive gesture. The ripples carry your voice away, and for a moment you imagine they whisper something back.
The morning returns like a whisper rather than a roar. A thin layer of mist drifts across the lake, soft as milk poured over a mirror. Your canoe glides through it, slicing the haze open with every slow paddle stroke. The air smells different now, damp, faintly metallic, with a cool bite that clings to your lungs. You pull your cloak, or, let's be honest, blanket, you've been calling a cloak, tighter around your shoulders and breathe in the quiet. The city ahead is waking. You can hear it before you see it. Low drum beats marking the dawn, the creak of oars from traders heading out to market, and somewhere far off, a rooster that probably has no idea how historically significant it sounds. The canals widen here, the Chinampas thinning as you approach the heart of Tenochtitlán once again. But this morning feels different. You notice banners being raised on tall poles along the shoreline, bright red and turquoise fabrics that shimmer when the first sunlight hits them. Canoes crowd the main waterways, not for trade, but for spectacle. The air carries an undercurrent of excitement, and beneath it, something heavier. Anticipation always has a scent, metallic, like the moment before rain. A group of children on a nearby Chinampa are stringing garlands of flowers, tossing a few into the water as offerings. Their mother corrects them when they drop too many. "Not all of them," she calls, laughing. "The gods aren't running a flower shop." You smile. Even in a world built on ritual, practicality survives. You ask a nearby paddler what's happening, and he looks at you like you've just asked what the sun is. "It's the feast of the rain gods," he says, matter-of-factly. "We must give thanks, or else." The way he says "or else" makes you reconsider your breakfast plans. Historians still argue whether these seasonal festivals were spontaneous celebrations or carefully orchestrated displays of political and religious power. In a city where the emperor was both ruler and divine intermediary, even gratitude could double as theater. The canals begin to fill as more people join the flow, canoes moving in careful formation toward a massive temple complex visible in the distance. You follow, carried along by the current and the momentum of 1,000 oars. The sound is mesmerizing, an aquatic heartbeat, steady and ancient. As you approach the temple's reflection shimmering on the surface, the full grandeur of the city unfolds. Massive stone pyramids rise from the island's center, their terraces painted in bold colors that seem to glow in the morning light. Between them, plazas buzz with life, merchants shouting prices, musicians tuning instruments, priests in bright feathered robes walking with deliberate grace. The whole city feels like it's breathing in unison. You beach your canoe near a small dock and join the crowd making its way toward the steps. The smell of incense hits you first, sweet, heavy, and just a touch dizzying. Flowers and copal resin burn together, sending spirals of white smoke skyward like messages for the gods. You cough once, quietly, and immediately pretend you didn't. At the base of the steps, farmers have gathered with baskets of maize, beans, chilies, and even small clay figures of frogs and fish, symbols of fertility and water. Each person lays down an offering, murmuring thanks to Tlaloc and his helpers, the Tlaloques. Children throw handfuls of petals into a fountain that's been filled with colored water, dyed the pale blue-green of jade. A priest stands at the top of the stairs, tall and imposing, his robe shimmering with turquoise and gold. He raises his arms and chants, his voice carrying across the square. You can't understand every word, but the rhythm of it works like a spell. The crowd joins in, a low murmur that builds and rolls like distant thunder. You glance around. Everyone is focused upward, eyes shining with devotion, or perhaps fear. It's hard to tell which emotion dominates. Faith and dread often travel as a matched set. A quirky fact, some Aztec rain ceremonies included frog impersonations. Priests and farmers would croak loudly together, believing it would encourage Tlaloc to send rain. Apparently, divine meteorology required a little bit of method acting. And yes, as the chanting swells, you actually spot a few older farmers squatting near the edge of the crowd, puffing their cheeks and making low croaking noises with complete sincerity. It's hilarious and oddly touching. Somewhere, you imagine, the god of rain is chuckling appreciatively. As the ceremony continues, musicians strike up a rhythm using drums, rattles, and conch shells. The sound rises, echoing between the stone walls, blending with the chanting until it's impossible to separate prayer from percussion. Dancers in feathered headdresses move in circles, their feet stamping dust into the air. It's hypnotic, ancient, and strangely modern, the kind of spectacle any stadium concert would envy. You find yourself swaying without meaning to, caught in the pulse of it all. The smoke, the scent, the sound, it's overwhelming in the best way. Then something unexpected happens. Rain. It starts as a whisper, a few hesitant drops tapping the stone. The crowd gasps collectively. Within moments, it grows, a sudden, steady downpour that drenches everything in silver. You stand frozen, laughing softly as water trickles down your face. Around you, people are weeping, shouting thanks, raising their hands to the sky. Historians still debate whether these miracle rains were genuine coincidences or clever manipulations, rituals timed with seasonal weather patterns. But standing here, soaked and surrounded by joy, it feels real enough. The timing is too perfect to be cynical. A small boy beside you looks up, grinning, his face slick with rain. He cups his hands and collects the drops like treasure. His mother smiles and tells him, "That's Tlaloc's blessing. Don't waste it." You resist the urge to tell him it's technically just condensation. You'd never recover your credibility. The downpour lasts only a few minutes, then fades as quickly as it came. The air smells electric now, the kind of scent that makes you think the earth itself just took a deep breath. The priests raise their arms one final time, shouting thanks, and the crowd slowly disperses. You make your way back toward the canal, drenched, exhilarated, and oddly moved. You can feel the water still dripping from your hair, the residue of something larger than yourself. Whether divine or meteorological, it feels like the lake, the sky, and the people just shared a secret. As you step back into your canoe, you glance at the surface of the canal. The ripples catch the last drops of rain, forming tiny circles that fade outward, touching each other, merging, disappearing. A reminder that everything here, water, earth, God, human, is part of one endless motion. You dip your paddle again, watching the ripples follow behind, and smile. Nice work, Tlaloc.
The sun leans westward now,
stretching shadows long across the Chinampas. The golden afternoon light turns the water to liquid amber, and you float slowly, savoring the silence that follows the morning's ceremonial excitement. The city's heartbeat, once fast and urgent, has softened into something steady and human scale. You drift past narrow canals, each one bordered with reeds and willows whose roots dip lazily into the water, brushing against the muddy floor. The smell of wet earth is strong now, mixed with faint smoke from distant cook fires and the soft tang of rotting vegetation. It's a scent that the Aztecs would have associated with life, not decay. You kneel at the edge of a chinampa and press your palm into the mud, remembering the rich texture from your previous visits. Here, the soil is alive, teeming with nutrients and microorganisms that quietly perform their ancient magic. You can almost feel them working beneath your fingertips, a slow pulse that feeds maize, beans, squash, and every other green thing the farmers coax from the lake. A farmer appears around the bend, carrying a bundle of reeds taller than himself. He wades through the shallow water, his feet sinking slightly into the soft mud. You recognize him from the morning, older now in a way that feels different under the evening sun. He begins stacking the reeds along the edges of the chinampa, building a small barrier. It's functional, preventing erosion, but also beautiful, a natural frame to the floating patch of life. Historians still argue whether Chinampa farmers had standardized methods for constructing these edges, or if each plot reflected individual style and ingenuity. Either way, you can't deny that there's an aesthetic quality to it. Architecture grown from mud, roots, and water. You sit back, letting your eyes follow the slow rhythm of the lake. The reflection of the sky dances across the water, mirroring the clouds above, and you notice subtle movements beneath the surface. Tiny fish dart between submerged plants. An axolotl glides lazily past, its frilled gills vibrating with an almost imperceptible energy. Somewhere, a turtle paddles silently. Every movement, no matter how small, contributes to the life of the Chinampa, reinforcing the delicate balance that the Aztecs mastered long before modern ecology was a thing. A quirky fact: Aztec farmers sometimes placed small offerings, bits of maize, flowers, or figurines at the water's edge. They believed that spirits lived in the canal itself, protecting crops and ensuring fertility. Imagine that, respectful bribes to the lake, centuries before environmental scientists suggested soil amendments. You wonder if those spirits ever wrote thank you notes. The farmer sets down his bundle and takes a moment to drink from a clay cup filled with canal water. You wince, but remind yourself that he's been doing this his whole life without incident. He grins at you knowingly and gestures for you to follow him as he leads you to a narrow path winding through a cluster of chinampas. The plants brush your arms as you pass, their leaves fragrant, earthy, and warm. You notice the interplay of corn, beans, and squash, the three sisters, working together in silent cooperation. The beans climb the corn, taking support, while the squash spreads at the base, shading roots and suppressing weeds. Every plant plays a role, and the farmer's hands guide them without ever forcing. He hums a soft tune, probably an old song meant to soothe the crops, and you hum along, imagining that perhaps the plants can hear it. Historians still debate the extent to which ritual and practicality intertwined here. Were songs sung purely for the psychological benefit of the farmers, or did they genuinely believe in the mystical growth-promoting effects of music? Either way, it's hard to not feel a sense of reverence as you move through this living, breathing system.
A fish leaps from the water nearby, scattering droplets that glitter like diamonds in the amber light. You duck reflexively, and the farmer chuckles. "Patience," he says. "The lake will teach you if you listen." You nod, feeling the truth of it more deeply than any lesson in a textbook could ever convey. He stops at a small plot of young maize, carefully spacing seedlings with the precision of a watchmaker. His hands move deliberately, brushing soil over the roots, whispering quietly to the plants. It's mesmerizing. You lean closer, and for a moment, the world shrinks to soil, water, and the gentle murmur of life surrounding you. The lake hums around you. Insects drift lazily along the surface, and the soft rustle of leaves whisper a timeless melody. The Aztecs understood this rhythm intuitively. They farmed in partnership with the lake, not over it. Every drop of water, every particle of soil mattered, and the balance of the ecosystem depended on the careful attention of human hands, guided by observation, tradition, and perhaps a touch of divine inspiration. You stand quietly for a moment, feeling the pull of the water beneath your feet, the subtle vibration of life in the mud, and the warmth of the sun fading behind distant clouds. It's the kind of quiet that isn't empty. It's full, rich, alive, and completely absorbing. And as you watch the farmer return to his chores, paddling slowly through the canal, you realize that this patient, deliberate life on water is the heartbeat of an empire, unseen yet essential, eternal yet fleeting, humble yet profound.
The sun is a mellow glow now, sinking toward the horizon and stretching long orange ribbons across the lake. Shadows of the Chinampas bend and twist, reflecting in the calm water like ancient calligraphy. You float silently, letting the paddle drift with the current. The air carries the faint scent of wet soil, maize, and smoke, mingled with the sweet, distant fragrance of flowers. It's the kind of smell that makes you feel like the world is being quiet just for you. You pass a small cluster of Chinampas where a family is gathered, their children running along the narrow paths between the plots. One little girl stops and dips her fingers into the water, laughing as fish dart away from her touch. A boy tosses small stones, careful not to disturb the reeds, and the rhythmic plop adds a subtle percussion to the evening symphony. The adults watch them with gentle smiles, voices soft and full of warmth. You can almost feel generations of care and observation woven into every gesture here. A quirky fact, some farmers believe that speaking kindly to the young plants would help them grow faster. You think about that as you trace a finger along a stalk of maize, its leaves still moist with the morning's dew, and wonder if plants respond not only to light and water, but also to attention and intent. It's an idea that modern science is only starting to explore. The path of the canals narrows as you drift farther from the central city. Tall reeds line either side, their tips whispering in the evening breeze. The water is mirror smooth now, reflecting the sky's fading blues and pinks. Somewhere nearby, an axolotl glides under the surface, its gills fanning delicately, oblivious to the grandeur above. You glance back toward Tenochtitlán. Even from here, the city's pyramid tops glimmer faintly, the last rays of sunlight catching the painted surfaces. The bustling markets and chanting priests feel distant now, like a dream half remembered. Out here, the lake dominates, not the empire. The water, soil, and reeds dictate the rhythm of life more than any temple or palace ever could. Historians still argue whether the Aztecs truly understood the ecology they lived within, or if their success was the result of observation, ritual, and a little luck. Perhaps the distinction doesn't matter. You can see the proof in the thriving Chinampas, in the collaboration of humans and water, in the careful layering of soil and silt that feeds the crops. A fisherman emerges ahead, pushing his canoe through the shallow water. He carries a net full of tilapia and small crayfish, moving with the ease of someone who has spent a lifetime in sync with this environment. He nods at you, eyes warm but reserved. You realize that everyone here seems to possess this quiet confidence, a trust in the balance of the lake that can't be taught, only lived. You drift closer to a small cluster of willow trees growing along a Chinampas edge. Their long roots dip into the water, swaying with the gentle current. Tiny frogs hop between the roots, their bodies slick and shimmering in the low light. Somewhere, a bird calls, a high, clear note that carries across the water. The lake feels alive with soft, interconnected movement, the kind you don't see at first, but sense with every careful breath. A child runs past, holding a small clay frog. She drops it into the canal, giggling, and the ripples spread outward. You watch them dissolve slowly, merging with other ripples from fish and birds, creating patterns that seem both random and deliberate. The lake teaches you something in these moments. Nothing here exists alone. Even the smallest actions ripple outward, affecting the world in ways you cannot always predict. The fisherman ties his canoe to a stake and begins untangling his net. You pause, watching the dexterity in his hands, the gentle patience required to free each fish and place it carefully into a basket. It's work that requires skill, knowledge, and respect. You recall that the Aztecs saw these daily labors as intertwined with spirituality. Tending the lake was not just practical, but sacred. Historians still debate the line between ritual and utility here. Was every act of feeding, planting, or fishing a devotional practice? Or was it mostly practicality with ritual sprinkled on top? Perhaps the Aztecs didn't need to separate the two. Out here, life, work, and devotion flowed together like the canals themselves. The last rays of sunlight fade, leaving the lake silver under a rising moon. Fireflies begin their nightly dance, flickering above the water like tiny floating stars. You breathe slowly, the rhythm of the lake syncing with your own. For a brief, perfect moment, you feel completely at peace, connected to this world of floating gardens, unseen creatures, and ancient knowledge carried through water, mud, and time.
The moon rises slowly now, casting a gentle silver glow over the lake. The water's surface shimmers like liquid metal, reflecting both the moon and the shadows of the Chinampas that stretch into the distance. You drift quietly, paddling just enough to keep moving, letting the night settle around you. The air is cooler now, carrying the scent of damp soil, flowers, and faint smoke from fires burning far off. Every breath feels full, grounding you in this living world. Out here, the lake feels timeless. You notice small fish skimming just beneath the surface, their scales glinting in the moonlight. An axolotl pauses near a root, its gills fanning slowly, almost as if it is aware of your presence. Somewhere, a frog croaks, and the sound echoes softly across the water, mingling with the gentle rustle of reeds. The night is alive, but in a quiet, hypnotic way, not the frantic energy of the city. You think back to the farmers who have been tending these Chinampas for generations. Each one knows every plant, every reed, every bend of the canal. They move.
The moon rises slowly now, casting a gentle silver glow over the lake. The water's surface shimmers like liquid metal, reflecting both the moon and the shadows of the Chinampas that stretch into the distance. You drift quietly, paddling just enough to keep moving, letting the night settle around you. The air is cooler now, carrying the scent of damp soil, flowers, and faint smoke from fires burning far off. every breath feels full, grounding you in this living world. Out here, the lake feels timeless. You notice small fish skimming just beneath the surface, their scales glinting in the moonlight. An axolotl pauses near a root, its gills fanning slowly, almost as if it is aware of your presence. Somewhere, a frog croaks, and the sound echoes softly across the water, mingling with the gentle rustle of reeds. The night is alive, but in a quiet, hypnotic way, not the frantic energy of the city. You think back to the farmers who have been tending these Chinampas for generations. Each one knows every plant, every reed, every bend of the canal. They move with the certainty of people who have lived and breathed the lake since childhood, their bodies and senses in perfect harmony with the rhythms of water and wind. Their lives are measured not by hours on a clock, but by the growth of maize, the rise and fall of water levels, the turning of seasons. Historians still debate how much of this knowledge was inherited instinct and how much was taught deliberately. Did the Aztecs cultivate not just crops, but intuition, passing down an understanding of the lake that modern science can barely replicate? Either way, the results are undeniable. The Chinampas thrive, a testament to human ingenuity and patience. You pass a Chinampa where small lanterns float on the water, tiny glowing reflections mirrored perfectly in the still lake. Families sit together, sharing quiet conversation, the occasional laugh and simple meals. You notice a small clay figure placed at the edge of the garden, a frog, carefully positioned and decorated with flowers. It's a small offering, a gesture of respect for the spirits that protect the water. You think of the boy you saw earlier collecting rain, and you realize these rituals, these tiny acts of care, are woven into every part of life here. A quirky fact, some Aztec farmers believed that whispering to the plants would encourage growth. Modern studies have shown that certain vibrations and sounds can influence plant development, which makes you wonder if these whispers weren't just superstition, but an early form of plant communication. Either way, it's a lovely thought, that the world listens if you speak gently enough. You drift past a willow whose roots trail in the water like delicate fingers. Tiny frogs leap between them, and a turtle surfaces briefly before slipping silently back beneath the surface. The interconnectedness of life here is clear. Each movement, each sound, each gesture contributes to the rhythm of the lake. A small canoe drifts past you, carrying a young couple who throw petals into the water. The flowers float and spin slowly, reflecting the moonlight, eventually merging with the ripples of other creatures. You imagine that every gesture leaves a lasting mark, however subtle, on the lake and its spirit. The water remembers all of it, the songs, the offerings, the quiet acts of care. You lean back in your canoe, letting the moonlight wash over your face. There's a profound stillness here, a feeling of being held in a world that has existed unchanged for centuries. The lake doesn't demand anything. It simply exists, responsive and alive. You wonder if the Aztecs felt this same reverence, drifting through the night, listening to the soft sigh of water against wood and soil. Historians still argue whether the spiritual practices surrounding the lake were more about survival or devotion. Out here, though, you feel that the two are inseparable. Care for the lake, care for the crops, care for each other. It all flows together, a continuous circle. You close your eyes, letting the gentle rocking of the canoe lull your mind. The lake's rhythm is hypnotic, and you feel yourself merging with it, each breath syncing with the subtle pulse of water, soil, and sky.
The stars are scattered across the sky now, countless points of light mirrored in the still water of the lake. You drift slowly, paddling lightly, letting the canoe carry you deeper into the network of Chinampas. The night is quiet, almost sacred, broken only by the gentle plop of a fish or the occasional rustle of reeds. The air is cool and slightly damp, scented with wet earth and the faint sweetness of nearby flowers. You can feel the pulse of the lake beneath you, subtle and constant, like the heartbeat of some ancient, patient creature. You pause and peer into the water, mesmerized by the reflections of the stars. The surface ripples gently with every paddle stroke, scattering points of light like diamonds thrown into liquid black velvet. Below, small fish weave between roots, their scales catching flashes of moonlight. Occasionally, a larger shadow passes, an axolotl, a turtle, perhaps even a water bird diving silently. The lake is a world within a world, alive in ways that you can feel more than see. You think about the farmers who built these floating gardens. Each chinampa is a careful arrangement of mud, reeds, and fertile soil, layered to withstand floods, nurture crops, and sustain life. The Aztecs didn't just grow food, they created ecosystems, blending human ingenuity with the rhythms of water. Every planting, every harvest, every repair of the reed edges was a dance with nature. You can almost feel their presence here, their patience and care embedded in the soil itself. Historians still argue whether the Aztecs fully understood the ecological principles behind Chinampas, or if their success was largely a product of trial, error, and observation. Either way, the results are undeniable. Lush gardens floating on a lake, feeding thousands in a city that thrives above water. A quirky fact? Some Chinampa farmers believed that certain birds acted as guardians. Herons and egrets were encouraged to nest nearby, their presence keeping other birds away from the crops. It's an early example of integrated pest management, centuries before organic was even a concept. You smile at the thought of a city built on both ingenuity and superstition. The canoe drifts past a small reed hut. Inside, someone is playing a soft tune on a flute. The notes carry lightly across the water, weaving through the reeds and mingling with the distant croak of frogs. Music, life, and labor here seem inseparable, each enhancing the other in ways subtle but profound. You realize that every sound is a part of the ecosystem. Songs soothe humans, vibrations ripple through the water, and perhaps even the plants respond in kind. You glide toward a cluster of flowers growing along a canal edge, marigolds, dahlias, and small white blooms whose names you'll never know. The colors glow faintly in the moonlight, reflected perfectly in the water. You imagine the Aztecs arranging offerings of these flowers at the water's edge, small gestures of gratitude for abundance, small acts to honor Tlaloc, Xochipilli, and the spirits of the lake. A child appears on a nearby chinampa, tossing petals into the water. The petals float, merging with ripples from fish and axolotls, moving together as if the lake itself is part of a carefully choreographed dance. The boy laughs when a frog leaps near the petals, and the sound echoes faintly across the water. Historians still debate how much of Aztec ritual was practical and how much was symbolic. The offerings could have encouraged pollinators, fertilized the soil, or simply reinforced communal bonds. Perhaps the beauty lies in the dual purpose, practicality and devotion, intertwined seamlessly. You drift a little farther, feeling the canoe rocked gently by a hidden current. The water seems to hum beneath you, carrying centuries of memory, songs, laughter, prayers, work, and quiet contemplation. You let yourself imagine floating like this for hours, days even, moving through a living, breathing system that requires patience, attention, and respect.
A soft breeze brushes your face, carrying the scent of wet earth, flowers, and faint smoke. You close your eyes, letting it envelop you. The lake, the night, and the stars merge into one rhythm, steady and unbroken. And for a moment, you feel completely suspended between heaven and water, past and present, human and divine.
Dawn edges the horizon now, pale pink seeping into the night's deep blue. You float through the Chinampas, the water cool beneath your fingertips, still holding the faint silver reflection of the moon. The world feels in transition, between night and day, sleep and wakefulness, shadow and light. The air is soft, moist, and carries the faint metallic tang of morning dew, mingled with the earthy aroma of wet mud. It's a smell that anchors you firmly in this ancient landscape, as if the world itself is exhaling after a long, quiet night. A heron lifts off from a nearby reed, wings stretching wide, silhouetted against the awakening sky. Its shadow stretches across the water, and you can't help but feel a thrill at seeing a creature so effortlessly in harmony with the lake. Fish ripple beneath the surface in response, and the soft chorus of frogs begins again, tentative at first, then swelling into a fuller song. The lake is waking up, and so are you, carried gently by its rhythm. You drift past a cluster of Chinampas, where a farmer is already working. He wades through shallow water, his feet sinking into soft mud, carrying baskets of seedlings to be planted. Every motion is precise, deliberate, a choreography perfected over years. You watch as he presses young maize into the fertile soil, patting each mound carefully, whispering soft encouragement to the plants. There's something profoundly intimate about this act, an acknowledgement that life, even in its smallest forms, deserves attention and care. A quirky fact, some Aztec farmers would scatter small offerings into the canals while planting, bits of maize, flowers, or tiny figurines. They believed that the spirits of the lake would help protect the crops, making it a collaboration between humans and the unseen forces of nature. You imagine that even if the spirits didn't exist, these rituals gave the farmers a sense of mindfulness and purpose. Historians still debate whether the Aztecs had a conscious ecological philosophy or if it emerged naturally from repeated observation. Either way, the results are undeniable. A thriving, sustainable agricultural system built on respect, patience, and careful attention. You glide past a small hut where a woman is stirring a pot over a fire. The aroma of cooking maize and herbs mingles with the lake air. Children sit nearby, their laughter blending with the gentle slap of water against the Chinampa edges. You notice small clay figures placed along the water, frogs, fish, and maize, each decorated with flowers and tokens of gratitude. The rituals are subtle, integrated seamlessly into daily life, almost invisible to an outsider, yet profoundly present. A gentle breeze stirs the reeds lining the canals. Tiny frogs leap from one root to another, and a turtle slips quietly beneath the surface. The interconnectedness of all life here is obvious. Each action, no matter how small, resonates through the ecosystem. You imagine that for the Aztecs, this interconnectedness was both practical and sacred, a lesson that modern civilization often forgets. You drift slowly toward a wider canal where the morning sunlight catches the water just right, making it look like molten gold. The reflections of Chinampas, birds, and flowers shimmer and dance, blending with the soft ripples of the current. You reach out and trail a hand in the water, feeling its cool, living weight,
a tactile reminder that this lake has witnessed centuries of life, work, and devotion. Historians still argue whether the daily routines of Aztec farmers were shaped more by ritual, ecology, or necessity. Either way, observing this world, you understand that the lines between devotion, survival, and practical knowledge blur here, creating a system that is both sustainable and deeply humane. You take a deep breath, letting the smell of wet earth, flowers, and cooking food fill your senses. The lake hums quietly beneath you, a living memory of countless generations, and you feel, somehow, connected to them. The rhythm of water, wind, and life lulls you into a soft, reflective state, ready to embrace the day, or perhaps just to float a little longer in this timeless, serene world.
The sun has climbed higher now, spilling golden light across the lake and turning the Chinampas into a tapestry of green, brown, and bursts of color from flowers and crops. You drift along the canals, letting your canoe glide effortlessly, the water calm and forgiving beneath you. The hum of daily activity rises slowly, distant voices, the rhythmic slap of paddles, the soft clatter of baskets being moved, the occasional laugh of children playing along the edges. It is a world that thrives quietly, meticulously, in tandem with the lake itself. You pause at a junction where several narrow canals intersect. The reflections of reeds and flowering plants flicker like watercolor paintings in the sunlit water. Tiny fish flash silver as they dart beneath the surface, and a turtle slides lazily into the shallows. Everything here seems connected, each movement influencing another in subtle, beautiful ways. You remember the lessons of the past days, the whispers to the maize, the offerings to the lake, the songs of priests and fishermen, and understand that the Aztecs' genius lay in harmonizing with the natural rhythms of this environment. A fisherman approaches, carrying a net filled with tilapia. He nods politely and passes you without incident. You notice how effortlessly he navigates the canals, how instinctively he balances on the narrow edges of the Chinampas. It's a skill born of necessity, observation, and perhaps a little inherited intuition. You realize that the people who lived here were masters of both the natural world and their own rhythms, a harmony achieved not through technology, but through patience and experience. Historians still debate whether the Chinampa system was an entirely deliberate invention or an accidental consequence of trial and error. Some argue that it arose naturally from practical need. Others insist it reflects a sophisticated understanding of hydrology and agriculture. Either way, the evidence is clear. These floating gardens sustained a city of hundreds of thousands and remain a testament to human ingenuity centuries later. You glide past a Chinampa where a family is harvesting maize. The rustle of leaves, the soft thump of ears being gathered, and the occasional laughter of children playing along the edges create a quiet symphony that blends seamlessly with the lake's gentle murmurs. A child tosses a handful of petals into the water, the ripples spreading outward, merging with those from fish, frogs, and the occasional falling leaf. You remember the boy from the previous day, collecting rain in his cupped hands, and you smile. Life here is a balance of reverence, care, and observation, and it continues in small, deliberate acts like this. A quirky fact: Aztec Chinampas were sometimes called floating gardens, but they weren't truly floating. They were anchored to the lake bed, creating a stable yet fertile environment. The name is poetic, though, and it captures the magical impression they give,
a human-made network of green islands rising from the water, thriving seemingly against gravity. The sun climbs higher still, casting patterns of light and shadow that dance across the canal surfaces. Birds flit from tree to tree, frogs call softly, and insects hum a lazy, warm chorus. You let your paddle rest, letting the canoe drift, and notice the harmony of it all. This is a world that functions without the constant noise of urgency. The lake, the plants, the animals, and the people exist in an intricate balance, each responding to and supporting the other. Historians still argue about how much of the ritual surrounding Chinampas was spiritual versus practical, but you realize that distinction may be irrelevant. Here, devotion, work, and observation are inseparable, each reinforcing the other in ways that sustain both people and land. You take a deep breath, filling your lungs with the scent of warm soil, blooming flowers, and the faint smoke of distant fires. The lake shimmers under the sun, reflecting light that feels both ancient and immediate, a reminder that this world has persisted through generations of care, celebration, and quiet labor. Time feels suspended. You drift, still and content, recognizing that the Aztecs' floating gardens are not just a marvel of agriculture. They are a testament to patience, respect, and the seamless blending of human life with nature. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the gentle rocking of the canoe, the rustle of reeds, and the distant laughter of children settle into your mind. The world is alive, balanced, and breathing around you, and for a few perfect moments, you feel completely integrated into it, part of the lake, the Chinampas, and the enduring rhythm of life that pulses through this ancient city. The sun climbs steadily now, soft warmth filling your body as the lake stretches endlessly around you. You let the paddle rest, feeling the gentle rocking of the canoe, the tiny ripples spreading outward with each subtle movement. The scent of wet earth, blooming flowers, and faint smoke blends into a gentle perfume that lulls your mind into slow, comforting rhythms. Every sense is engaged in the quiet orchestra of life, the water, the reeds, the birds, the tiny insects, and the distant calls of humans going about their day. You take a deep breath, filling your lungs with the richness of the world around you. The lake holds centuries of memory beneath its surface, yet it feels immediate, intimate, and alive. The floating gardens, the carefully nurtured crops, the whispers and offerings, the laughter and song, they all merge into a gentle, sustaining energy. It is patience made tangible, devotion made visible, and life made harmonious. Your eyes drift closed. You feel the sun on your face and the water beneath your fingertips. Every sound, every movement becomes softer, slower, until even the occasional splash of a fish seems to echo from a distant memory. The lake carries you gently through its rhythm, a lullaby of centuries, a quiet song that reaches the edges of your mind and settles there. Even the smallest details, frogs leaping, petals floating, reeds swaying, become reminders of balance, of care, of patience. You imagine the Aztecs of long ago, working, singing, listening, and living in harmony with their world, and you feel a calm connection to those who came before. The lake remembers everything, and now, for a few precious moments, so do you. Let the gentle motion of water cradle your thoughts. Let the sounds of life and memory weave through your mind. Feel the warmth of sun and the soft weight of history pressing lightly, soothingly against you.
And as you drift, imagine yourself part of this vast, enduring world, where care, patience, and reverence are not just ideals, they are life itself.